imagine 500, 600 guns shooting
at the same time.
same
It's
time
like a
there.
war.
Yes.
That's
It's
ridiculous.
the ANC MK combatants
Mm,
were extremely highly trained.
mm.
People may underestimate that.
Did this happen?
I'm giving you a practical. I can even give you the person who left in those years that was 64, 60 something.
And got paid
and
6,000
got
rand.
6,000 rands.
This is someone who was in exile as an MK cadre for 29 years.
29 years
Came
in
back,
exile.
Came
yes.
back when everybody else was coming back to South Africa.
Yes.
And they got 6,000
And then
rand.
they calculate their...
And they became, probably, did they join the military?
An ANC-led government 30 years later could have put Nzolo in a much better position.
King David Studio podcast.
Were you not overwhelmed when you arrived and found that there were so many of you? Remember, you left just the four of you in a car.
You will be overwhelmed. Remember, every Monday there was a tradition in the camps that we became part of. Weekends, the training and everything else subsides a bit. You have a right to go and play soccer and challenge the trained officers and all of that. But on Monday, there's an hour that they used to call jazz hour.
Okay.
Where we sing and dance, and we are allowed to shoot as much as you can.
Hey, man. Why? So you get used to this gun?
Well, it's jazz hour. It's one way of motivating us.
Don't shoot people. Just
shoot in the air, and it's different calibers. I mean, you have your AK-47, you have the big ones, your PKMs. And there's what we call you have the center of the camp, and then you have what we call the outposts, where you would man your big artillery guns, anti-air guns are there. If there's coordination, it would start from the inside, where the commander would open the shooting spree by shooting maybe a 9mm Makarov, pa. And then sing and dance ensues, and then you shoot.
That's crazy.
So imagine 500, 600 guns shooting
at the same time.
It's
like a war.
Yes,
that's ridiculous.
It's nice in that sense.
I'm trying to find a nice thing about it. I struggle.
It's a happy moment.
What are you celebrating? And what kind of celebration is that?
What else can you do? It's a happy moment.
You can just sing and dance and listen to songs.
But we've got guns. Let's shoot them in there.
What a crazy moment.
So that was that.
It was tradition, clearly. Yeah. You found it there.
We found it there. It continued, beyond after us.
Do you know something that stands out about all of this? It's something that I've always been interested in, and I'm hoping I'll find South African Defence Force. Was it called a force then? Yes, it was.
Force.
Yes. I hope I'll find those white boys who were in the military during that time.
Yes.
So they can tell their side.
Their side of the story as to what is it that they were told.
Interesting. I had a chat with Jeremy Mansfield, used to be with 94.7.
Yes, I know Jeremy
May his soul rest in peace.
Yes.
And he told me about his experience, but very
because
little.
Because he was conscripted.
Exactly.
Yes, by law.
By law. He told his version, very limited, because we were talking about radio and all of that. But he said, hey, man, I had to do that.
Yeah. And remember, after integration, after 94, we had to sit and braai with these guys. They are part of the system.
The same guys who were looking for you
and
all
we
over
were,
Africa.
And we were looking for them.
For.
Today, we are now protecting the same country and the same constitution.
Interesting story
so
of this country.
We would talk about these incidences.
And they would probably talk about their version.
We would laugh about it and braai and have a beer together.
Were you in Lusaka? He would ask.
Yeah, Angola. Hey, I missed you. I could have have you come through my path, I would have blown your head off. and yeah, that's
What a crazy South Africa. That's such a unique
That's a beauty
story
of
that you'll never
of South
find
Africa.
anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, equally when one was now in the intelligence of the country in the newfound NIS,
Mm.
we were brought into an existing structure with them.
Yes.
So we'd sit and talk and
About what they knew.
about they
what
knew
you were
and how to and Lerona we would say, you know, did I come on your radar from the name point of view? Some would say yes, some would say, look, let's leave that. And
It's in the past.
It's in the past. And we would hug and do poiki course and on all the other things.
Do you know something also that comes up for me right now? I'm thinking about how we survived a war in this country. A civil war.
A civil war, yes, we did.
We had so many trained soldiers from the side of the freedom fighters and the side of the people who were defending their Vaderland.
And look, you may be saying it lightly, but the truth is that, and I can vouch for this, the military, the ANC, MK combatants were extremely highly trained. People may underestimate that, but we were. Remember, you finish your general course in Angola. You may be taken for an extra military training in Germany.
Sure. And the stories of Russia?
In Russia, in Cuba, to enhance.
It's specialized now.
Yes, and now it's different environments. Russia is 48 degrees below zero. So if you're asked to crawl on the snow, it's a huge,
the type of training that the local South African Defence Force were not exposed to.
Would not be exposed to.
Internationally trained.
Yes, we that would include the intelligence training that they would give you, because then it pits you against the best in the world. Your Mossads from Israel, the British MI6, the CIAs, and all of that. So what came out of the units that were trained by Russia and Germany and Cuba from an intelligence point of view, it was a good quality of people.
Yeah.
They would not give us mediocre kind of training.
Those South Africans go give them something.
Remember, it's in their interest. The liberation of South Africa works in favor of the Eastern Bloc.
Of course.
It always gets back to the proxy.
The story hasn't changed.
East and West.
As now they call it, what do they call it now? The Global South.
The Global South and so forth.
Yes.
If you really look at BRICS,
it's the Global South. It's that bloc, still the same.
It's the same that fights hegemony of the West and so forth and so forth. Sure. So it's really, that war continues at a different level now.
With different countries.
Different countries.
We are still a part of it.
We are part of BRICS.
The noise, not only that, the noise we make, The Hague it's part of that.
ICJ.
It's part of that.
It has a historical thingy that our relationship with the Palestinian people, Fratellini, and today's other liberation movements in the world that are still fighting to attain their independence, we would still continue to have a relationship with. Because I know we are nearing the end. It then brings this angle that says, going back to a question that you asked when we started, have we continued on that path of the NDR by the ANC? Because it doesn't only speak to the practical things of the land and so forth. It also speaks to a policy direction that informs what becomes our international, policy. You have these countries in the East that had put everything they had towards us, financial support, military support, giving us bases. Angola is one of the countries that tops in their contribution towards the liberation of this country.
They housed you.
They gave us the basis.
They gave you land.
They gave
to
us
train your army.
Absolutely everything. Logically, and this is my logic, because maybe I'm just a tiny, web in the bigger scheme of things. Logic dictates to me that come 94, we have a new dispensation. We have the ANC now in government and new president and all of that. Clearly, the agenda is to then go back and say thank you to everybody else.
It only makes sense. Because it's not like they bought you a bottle of beer or box of beer. They gave you life.
They gave us life. They gave us hope. They gave us practically, and I'm saying money, weapons, food. They clothed us. They gave us a home in their countries at the risk of their own people getting bombed and so forth and so forth.
And for many, many years.
For years. They housed O.R. Tambo for 30 years. And his entourage. Now, I would have imagined, and this is my logic, that in your mission to say thank you, your first port of call as the new government that is led by the ANC would be to those that really contributed.
Yeah.
You would have started here in Africa. That's your first mission as head of state.
Yeah.
You would go to Angola and say thank you. You would go to Tanzania.
You would go on what is called a victory lap.
Yes, you'd go to, start in Africa, these countries that have contributed.
Including Botswana, as you
all
past,
of this, SADC, all of
yes.
this.
Including Mozambique with their half-half.
Yes.
Their Marshall
Swaziland,
stories.
Lesotho, say thank you to Africa as a continent.
Yeah.
And your next lap would then be Europe, but this part of Europe. You'd go to Russia, you'd go to
China.
That
rice,
yes,
made a difference.
A huge difference.
Yeah.
You'd go to the then German Democratic Republic, you'd go to Cuba, you'd go to Sweden, it gave us cheese. You'd go to Norway, you'd go to the Nordic and the Scandinavian countries and say, thank you for your support. And then you can go to Washington, D.C.
How did we do it?
We started in Washington, D.C.
Our president. Was it a collective decision, in your opinion? Because one thing I've learned about, without really getting into the details of ANC politics, is that it's never a decision made by one person.
No, it is not. And this calls to question a lot of things. But let me say this. I risk being misunderstood, but I can risk that. I don't think Oliver Tambo was our first president. After 94, we would have started in Washington, D.C. That's me. Some people may read this for me to be saying something about Nelson Mandela, which I'm not. I'm merely saying if OR were, he would not have started there.
Understandably. He was in the trenches, so to speak. He was there.
Yeah.
And the Nelson Mandela story is very different.
It is different. I'm therefore lamenting. I wish someone else would come in and talk about Tambo per se.
Yes, the man.
And give the full account and the role that he had played.
Yeah.
Not OR Tambo International Airport. We appreciate that. But,
the man.
The man himself. link that to the liberation of Namibia itself through 435 and all of those things, his contribution to the entire African continent, because he played a significant role.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recall how many times the Angolan president officially visited South Africa.
I don't.
Why is it?
Is this? Are they angry?
I don't know.
Are the Angolan people angry?
But logically,
that we forgot what they did.
But logically, why is that?
Have we been?
That's why I'm saying go into history
to Angola
and say, of the head of states that
has
that
anyone
we had
been to Angola?
Well, I don't want to say. I'm saying do your own research.
Well, no. This is you're not judging anyone. You're simply highlighting your knowledge of it.
Yeah,
because that's true.
If misnomers of
if no one has gone, that's the story.
Well, Jacob Zuma went there, but as deputy president of the country.
During when Becky was president.
When Becky was president.
Yeah. Are you saying Becky has never been to Angola?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying Jacob Zuma went there as deputy president to say to the Angolan people, thank you.
Was it a clear mission? Or he was there for other...
He was representing government.
Isn't that enough?
I don't know.
Because sometimes you're unable to go to a funeral and
I acknowledge
uncle.
That.
Yeah. Because you have the time.
Yes.
Go and do this for us.
Yes. But I'm saying you have a 10-year tenure. You can always be perpetually
busy.
Yeah.
And I guess also it speaks to the importance of the meeting, of the visit. I'm
saying go there and say thank you. That's me.
Have we thanked the African and any other country for that matter? Have we thanked the people who helped South Africa achieve its freedom enough from the perspective of them housing the MK and other military formations?
If you ask me if we've done that enough, personally, I would say no. I don't think so. Personally,
yeah.
Someone in government or in the ANC may contradict me and say he's too junior to know we have
what
done
we did.
1, 2, 3, 4,
yes.
and I would appreciate that because perhaps my knowledge is limited and therefore my input or response to that is also limited.
That's true.
But I don't think we had done enough. Take the other angle. We are now a democracy. We are working. And this talks to the business aspect of things. We are opening up the economy. We don't have the capacity to do certain things. We call for assistance from the world. I would have, and maybe people are lucky. I'm not the president that thinks in that fashion. From an opportunity point of view, I would have been biased
to Africa.
Africa and the Eastern Bloc.
True.
And then the rest would come later. But if you look at what we had done in opening opportunities at that multinational level, we did like we did our first stop.
The Washington stop.
And
have we been to Zambia?
We must have been. We should have been to Tanzania. We have a school there, the Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn and I'm seen as a person who is saying the ANC-led government or the ANC itself as a party has not done enough in thanking the people. Perhaps the ANC as a party may have gone to say to Chama Chama, Pinduza, and UNIP and all of that.
Because they're two different entities.
Yes.
The South African government and the ANC, are two different entities.
Yeah, they could have done as an ANC, could have gone and shook hands and say thank you and cried and have cigar and champagne or whatever. But I'm not sure as the ANC government whether we had done that enough. Perhaps we are also limited by, our international relations with other countries in the world, and we would not want to be seen to be spoiling those relations.
Because it's a very volatile and fragile space to manage international relations.
It is. So, in as much as one may want to criticize the ANC government, you ought to also be cognizant of the realities and the dynamics and the geopolitical positioning and the diplomacy and all of that, and give them a slack in as far as that is concerned.
But as a party, it's a different approach.
So I think the party may have gone to Angola, the party in Angola, I think, was it MPLA?
And all these other countries.
And all these other countries as a party delegation to say Siyabonga and so forth and so forth. So this input, I wish for people to understand it in that context, that you have a government and you have the ANC, and those are the dynamics and the relations.
And in terms of the coming back home.
Yes.
You guys were there for a long, long time. What is collectively, how many years were you in exile for? And most of it in training and as an officer of the MK.
8 years in my case.
Yeah.
Which is not too long, but it is too long because you're not home.
You're not home. It doesn't sound long. I guess you say that disclaimer because there are others whose terms are much longer.
Absolutely. There are people who left here in 76.
Sure.
And only came back in 93, 90. So it's long.
So yeah. And I guess, time always seems short when you compare it with somebody else's time.
Absolutely.
It is. Like
Absolutely.
8 years is a long time to be away from home.
In Vusi Mavimbela's book, where he says time is not the measure,
yes.
I think he deals with
this very part of the conversation.
Yes. You left in 63, I left in 89. Time is not the measure.
Yeah.
It's the contribution that is critical. It's the sacrifice.
When are you told that you're coming back? Like how does that go about? That gents, smele kaya manje. And I know I'm skipping a lot of bits here because a lot happens in the 8 years.
Yes.
Being in exile.
Yes.
It's not a 1 week experience. It's an 8-year experience.
The coming back home en masse.
Because that's what it is.
And the coming back home on a mission, on an operation.
Have you been here for an operation?
From an MK point of view, no.
Okay.
I wasn't.
You came close when you were in the neighboring countries.
Almost and so forth. But part of my colleagues that might eventually come and see you would then deal with their experiences.
Of course.
Of coming into the country, how they survived.
So there
and
are some
back.
that came
Yes, there's
back
some that came
with clear missions.
Yes, and then
the destruction of the events of the 80s, with the larger part of the 80s, which was the destruction of so many things in the country, was indeed MK missions.
They were. They were largely that. But remember, parallel to military operations, there was talks that had developed to a peaceful transition.
The unbanning of political parties.
Then
they were not political parties.
No.
They were what are they? Freedom. What do we call
whatever.
They were not political parties. They were not contesting politics.
No. We were liberation movements.
Exactly. That's the phrase I'm looking for.
We were liberation movements.
Yes.
Parallel to that the talks had begun between the ANC
And the National Party.
National Party plus the business community of South Africa. You know, is it Gavin Riley and all these Ruperts and whoever had begun an engagement with the ANC.
Which ANC? And I asked this question gently. Is Mandela released in this part of your story?
No.
He's in prison.
Mandela is released in 1990.
Yes, that's why I'm asking at what stage of your story. He's not released, but conversations have begun.
These are the 85s, from the 85.
But the 85 is a Botha year.
Yes, it is.
And that's a very volatile
And
year.
Botha is saying no to any white South African having contact
with
the ANC.
And Botha makes clear statements that these guys are nothing.
They're nothing. They are terrorists. They're a bunch of hooligans.
We are trying, because I remember Botha is working to survive as a politician within the National Party.
Yes,
he's working to try to assert his power.
Absolutely.
And in the political party, the Rubicon story. The Rubicon speech is nothing else but a president that says, I'm in charge.
I'm in charge.
And
don't push us too far.
That's it. That's exactly that. And he's not even talking to the ANC.
No,
he's talking to all
the
his
world.
Yes, he's talking to all his enemies.
Yes.
Hey.
Don't push us too far. He's talking to the SADC region. Sorry, I can bombard you.
Exactly. Because this is a president of a country that doesn't need half the world.
No.
They have food. They have oil.
They have
through
oil.
Sasol. They have their own arms.
Yes. They have electricity.
They have electricity in mass. They don't even need half of it.
Water.
In mass.
Dams and all of. They've got the infrastructure. They've got rail. They have highways and byways. They've got factories. They've got farms.
That are working.
So their food security is intact.
The economy is strong.
And
yet the sanctions, some real, some half-half.
Fluke.
Yeah. They are there on paper, but not in reality.
Yeah.
They have nuclear power.
Yeah, they have nuclear power. The sanctions at the time are not mandatory. And Oliver Tambo is fighting for the world to say, let the sanctions be mandatory.
Yes.
Saying to Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan at the time, and George Shultz and the rest of the American administration.
And they're saying you're crazy. There's diamonds there and cheap labor.
We've got our factories there.
There's gold.
There's Ford there. There's everybody else there.
Chevrolet was in the country.
Absolutely.
We were drinking Pepsi.
And these American conglomerates, which you say they must now leave.
You're mad.
There's the Anglo-American diamond, whatever, gold.
I remember as a kid, we all wanted to work for Anglo-American.
There's the tobacco industry. So why do you want us to sanction
these guys?
To liberate who? You, Churna. I mean, Churna is black. It means black man in Russian.
What do you have?
What do you have? You're a bunch of terrorists. Actually, you are aligned with our enemy.
The Russians.
So don't come and tell us crap.
What an interesting time, eh? But with that, there's still negotiations, or at least conversations.
Conversations are starting.
Yeah. Who are they talking to? Who's the national party government talking to?
The leadership of the ANC, amongst others, is former President Thabo Mbeki. There's a time where the narrative was that within the ANC there are hawks and doves.
Explain that.
Chris Hani and all those that were saying, let's fight, were branded as the hawks.
Okay.
The Thabo Mbeki that said, let's fight, but also prepare ground for talks, were regarded as the doves. Now, that narrative was silly in that it clearly was dividing the ANC itself. It was making the Hawks a threat to the world and therefore a target.
Okay.
Which then brings you to the question that if Chris was seen as this hardline Hawks, and the others were not, you can easily say that's why he was assassinated or singled out for assassination. Because every other leader was vulnerable.
That's true, but
to assassination.
But he was singled out.
Yeah. Why is it?
It's a big question.
So it is that narrative that was created then that says, they are hawks and doves. And the narrative grew to a point where people were saying, actually, Thabo Mbeki and Chris Hani were not seeing eye to eye, which was not correct. They differed as they should have.
In any relationship.
Yes. On which must we emphasize on, whether talks or barrel of a gun. And that's what it was all about. They were members of the NEC who understood ANC policy, who understood that these debates were healthy, and they ought to have happened because they shaped our going forward. If we were to talk, what is it that we put on the agenda? The ANC had sets of demands that they had put forth for the regime to consider if we were to sit down with them. Which then, if you look at that, you'd say these talks had already started. And your Govern Rally and all of those that had started visiting Lusaka wanted to know that what is it that would make the ANC come to the table? Forget the regime. What is it that...
What do you want?
What do you want? And the ANC would then say release of all prisoners and banning of political parties and a list of all of these demands, which the business community would then take through their channels to say to the regime, actually the ANC is
ready to talk.
However, these would be the conditions, and PW would say yes or yeah over my dead body, etc., etc.
Wow.
But those then were, now it would not have been that those that are regarded as the hawks were the only ones who had an input on the demands.
Of course.
Yes.
It was a
collective in that sense.
Yeah.
That
Chris it wasn't one or the other.
Chris would come and say, of course, these are the demands from a perhaps more military point of view.
Of course, yeah.
And we understand the entire propaganda machinery would have pushed the narrative that suggested that there was a huge rift
between the two of them, or within the NEC of the ANC.
Of the ANC.
And maybe not a rift, just a difference of opinion.
And it was allowed.
Yeah, it's only natural.
Which we thrived on, as I said earlier. What became unfortunate is that culture, as we came home and the ANC was in power, began to dissipate.
Yeah, we are still told that the debates are robust. We still get that impression.
Well, I wouldn't know because I'm no longer participating in any structures of the ANC, be it the branch and so forth and so forth. So it would be unfair for me to make a comment whether the debates are robust or they are not until I go back to the branches and participate and so forth and so forth. So they may be true, they are robust, but I wouldn't know.
The mass coming back, what was that? How was that? Now ANC is unbanned.
It's
the late 80s, early 90s.
90s.
Yes.
The release of Nelson Mandela
is a story on its own.
Yeah.
Where are you when Mandela is
the tone.
released?
We are watching on TV in Lusaka.
You were not here.
No. How would I have been here?
Well, you're thinking everybody got a call.
The release of Nelson Mandela, I think, set the tone for the preparation of a mass going back home.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, it brought mixed feelings to a lot of people. Those that had been there 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, you don't know what to expect.
And you established yourself there.
Some have got families with non-South Africans.
Of course.
What then do I do? Do I take this newly found family of Angolans or Zambians? Or do I go back to my high school sweetheart that I hope is unmarried and is waiting for me 25 years back at home? Are realities.
Pause 1 second. Let's go back to one of the countries, Zambia.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the integration of South African contingent of hundreds of thousands of people
mm-hmm.
that came into the country with a clear mission, military training, and so forth and so forth and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then one morning, they have to leave and go back home.
Yeah.
And they've left what you've just described now,
mm-hmm.
a life.
Yeah.
Or, well, whether they're leaving it or not, it's another debate.
Mm-hmm.
As we speak, you and I today, the link between Zambia, Angola, and many other countries, between South Africa, is not only historic, continues today, and it's blood.
It's blood. It is blood.
Yeah. Because at some point, we had set camp in those countries.
Absolutely. And I'm saying life continues. It doesn't stand still because we're in Angola.
No.
Or Tanzania or Zambia or Zimbabwe or Mozambique.
You get married, you form relationships, you have children.
You have children. I'm a living example. I have a baby girl here next door in Botswana. And
that child that life was created in those days.
In those days, when I was in a recording officer in Dukwi, the camp.
No, Papa son, you had just arrived. You had just arrived.
I stayed longer in Dukwi than you can imagine.
Okay, what is long?
I heard you say a few months. I must have stayed.
I'm not saying it. Maybe I concluded incorrectly.
No. I must have stayed a year and a half.
Okay, well, it is a significant time.
Yeah.
to connect with the locals.
With the locals and do. So my daughter was born in 1988.
Jeez.
But what is hurting to me is that I have not made connection with my daughter since.
Wow. What's wrong?
There's nothing wrong. And here's, I think, where the challenge is. The young girl that I had met who then conceived, I was recalled to Lusaka 2 months before she gave birth.
Wow.
And I couldn't meet her and say, hello, goodbye, I'm leaving.
You were just a soldier.
The car comes and they say, Peg, we are leaving. You say, when? They say, now.
Well, fast forward. You're back in the country.
Yes,
You're living a different life.
Yes.
South Africa finds its freedom.
I've gone back so many times to Botswana to trace. I always hit a brick wall, but I'm not giving up. And I'll tell you why I hit a brick wall. Because what I do know is the mother's name.
That's it.
And not the surname.
That is a limitation.
It is a huge limitation.
Neighborhood.
I had not been to her homestead.
Mm.
Because when we met, Dukwi refugee camp was huge in that it also housed locals who were schooling in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So she was from amongst the nearby villages for schooling purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But her home is in Francistown.
Sure.
And Francistown from Dukwi is from here to Durban in terms of distance, give or take.
Sure. So
now,
the attempt to search.
I will continue.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in 1989 or 90, if I'm not mistaken, I am back in Botswana. I'm back in Francistown. Coincidentally or accidentally, I don't know which one of the two is correct, I bump into this lady.
There we go.
In town. She's from a local clinic because she has another small baby.
Okay.
The attitude is that of anger towards me. And it's understandable.
You just left.
You just left. I tried to say, but it's not out of my own making. There's nothing I could do. And naturally, you then inquire for Eamon. My daughter's name is Neo. Kirjanungo munye Neo arogolape. Okay, so when do I and how do I come and see Neo?
You're still underground.
It's the 90s.
Yes.
It's relatively
okay. We haven't reached democracy yet.
No, democracy comes 4 years later.
Okay, yeah.
Okolapeng, I plead to see there's a big no. I insist. She then says, "Nya, you know, Botswana have got cattle and so forth." Now, I'm in town with her. She lives in a village nearby. I don't know what that village name is. I don't know how to get there. And she denies me. And part of her argument was that I have a new life. You can see I have a new baby. It means there is this person to whom your daughter relates with as the biological father.
Oh.
So why do you want me to rattle this and then, scupper my child?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm good. That's her reasoning out of anger, despondency, and sees me as this irresponsible person.
Yeah.
And from her perspective, she's correct. But the reality is that I did not abandon this child. It's circumstances that I could not help.
You were a soldier.
And I was under orders and instructions.
I get a feeling that the story is common. Not identical.
With a lot.
Yeah.
It's
because
possible. There are some of us who have kids in Angola.
I imagine.
In Tanzania.
You've lived there for years.
In Zambia. In Sweden. and other places. In Cuba, in Germany, and
all an apartheid creation. That's the entire story.
All of that. So I've gone to Botswana several times. I've even commissioned the help of the Botswana Defense Force officials who are my friends to go back and go to the school records in Dukwi and check this person.
Sure.
Because out of those records, they might get an actual address that I can use to go there. But for some reason, they told me that they couldn't find it. I'm not convinced. Given an opportunity, intend, God willing, I'm still alive, go to the actual Dukwi camp.
And see if you can trace it from there.
From there, because I can then say in this year, here's this person. She had a Zulu name as a Motswana, but Tandi.
Which can stand out.
Yes. Tandin this year, Abala, this thing. I don't know the name of the school.
But you might, the name is, you can find.
You know, they can trace and say, Khunale Tandi 1, 2, 3. The address that one. If they give me 3 different addresses in Francistown, I'd visit all the 3.
Yeah.
Now, a child born in 88 would be what?
In their 30s. Mid-30s.
Yeah. I think she's now an independent
adult.
Probably
with her own family.
I would love to have an opportunity to sit and let it be her who says,
Get sharp.
Good to have met you, Marake Grand. Because that chapter must be closed.
Yeah, but it's always a tricky space that you're dealing with closure on your side, maybe, but it's not needed, maybe. You know, there are all sorts of permutations to a story like this because she probably doesn't even know that she has a father.
My suspicion is that the mother did not tell her. You see? Because from the onset she was saying, but why would the mother then break that over the years?
You see what I mean?
If I'm lucky, Hansa Hola coming of age, the mother might say, actually, now that you are 25 or 26,
here's the story.
Here's the truth. Your dad is actually a South African.
Sure. That's why I say closure is a tricky thing here.
Yeah.
Because who knows then you now.
But for my own sake,
you see what I mean.
I would love to have the opportunity to say,
you're my dad. You're my daughter.
You are my daughter.
Sure.
Let her reject me or accept me, and then I'll go home.
Yeah.
I hope I get an opportunity like that. It may not happen. Since perhaps she's coming to South Africa always because Botswana always here.
Botswana's studied in South Africa.
It's a 3-hour drive.
Yes, it's a very short drive.
Give or take. She probably comes to Botswana regularly. I perhaps bumped into her in one of the malls.
Life works, eh?
Yeah.
Life works. Now, the mass coming back. Here's a subject that I want to touch quickly. It's about the exiles. We've spoken about it, and the prisoners.
Robben
Islanders.
Yes.
I didn't know that there's a collision course at some point, whether it's a narrative that's been created or it's amongst just those that are in that world. Who got us freedom? Was it those that went to Robben Island or those that went to exile or those that just were fighting for freedom in all sorts of corners of South Africa, because it wasn't achieved in one event. It was achieved in a series of events by many people. Has that been a discussion of or a debate at all?
I've always touched on this subject matter when I engage with the young generation within the ANC to put context to this issue of the exiles, the exiles, and those who stayed behind. What was called the MDM, Mass Democratic Movement, out of the UDF and so forth and so forth. The prisoners are confined naturally. There is very little that they can do to participate in the everyday ongoing of our struggle. It's natural. You are locked in a cell, they open for a few hours, they lock you for the next 30 years or so. I'm not saying you are not part of the struggle, because for you to be there, it means you had participated.
Absolutely.
That's why you were arrested. So you've contributed one way or the other. So you become a huge part of this will that liberates our people. We rallied behind the name Nelson Mandela, who was in prison. That became an international symbol.
Was it even when you were in exile?
O.R. Tambo rallied, made the name what it is today.
Okay.
They could have chosen any other.
They could have chosen
Walter
Babu
Sisulu.
Sisulu.
They could
And
have
many
chosen
others.
Governor Mbeki or Wilton Mkwai. You know,
They were all in the same
Elias
place.
Mtsoaledi, they were all in the same place.
Yeah.
They chose Nelson Mandela. And the question always says, why Nelson Mandela? I can't give a definitive answer, save for me to, in my own little mind, think that perhaps it is because of the defiant speech that he made at the Rivonia trial.
I have fought
Yeah, something like that.
against white domination.
Yes, and I'm therefore prepared to die. So in that symbolism, he was perhaps, and I'm thinking aloud, that the name was then chosen to rally behind. And what a name it turned out to be.
However, it can't just be that. There must be a lot more to it. I say this because his activities prior to his arrest were quite pronounced.
They were
quite
pronounced. They were there.
Absolutely.
There was a Nelson
David Gegard.
Mandela, yes.
You know,
yes.
he was undercover, and when he was arrested, he had a gun.
He did a lot.
He was a military guy.
Yes. And he was arrested before all of these Barivonia trial. They
Yes.
He's actually serving a sentence.
You see, yeah.
So Nelson Mandela had always been that name.
Yeah.
Now, to me, in response to your question, the core and the center that held this fight, this revolution, is the people back home. That's where I place our liberation as a country. That's what made it possible for us to come back home as exiles. If the people in South Africa had decided to sit back
and wait for you guys to do something,
what would we have?
Or wait for the prisoners to do something.
What would the prisoners have done? You know?
Yeah.
So it's not one or the other. These things are connected. The mass mobilization and conscientization of the people inside the country had to be driven by someone elsewhere, and the ANC played a significant role as a band organization to bring and operate the underground here to make the people ready. Oliver Tambo always said that we are not like Angola and Zimbabwe. We don't have big, large bushes for our guerrillas to hide when they are inside the country. The bush becomes our people.
You hide amongst the people.
We hide amongst our people. But it must be a conscious people
that are aware
that when you are here, you are not necessarily a threat to them. You are not a terrorist. You are actually here to liberate them, for them to play a role of hiding and protecting you. It takes a lot of politicization and conscientization and the risk that they will have to take. So when I say it is the masses of our people, they didn't do that in isolation of the ANC as the leader of the revolution, taking part in shaping and making sure that this center and this pillar holds. It is unfortunate, and I'm saying unfortunate, for when we came back and preparing talks and the CODESA and all of that, that certain people in our society sought to position themselves by creating a narrative that seeks to suggest that those who are from exile are elitist. It's an unfortunate narrative. That they come with all of these demands and so forth and so forth. That narrative is completely off the mark. We came back home and we were happy to be back home, to be integrated back into society without any.
And you came back before
demand.
Elections.
We came back before elections.
Yeah. Did you come back with expectations?
No. What were we
I
expecting?
don't know.
we had no. But the narrative says we were expecting this or that
To be
or
treated different. Like maybe you have a new Kasi, Yama to exile.
No,
with
no,
tarred roads.
No. On the contrary, we wanted to be back home with our families and be integrated into society. As to what kind of a country comes out after 1994, we wished for this. As to whether we would get what we wished for was something else, but we understood we had to continue working and fighting for that which we believed must be the outcome.
Because 1994 elections and the freedom that comes the morning after is merely a destination. Like we arrive.
Yeah.
We go into Durban, you and I, we arrive at the airport.
Yeah.
The trip hasn't really started.
Absolutely. The train hasn't taken. I mean, the plane hasn't taken off.
We've just arrived.
Yeah.
And now the real story starts there.
It starts there.
Even though to get there took so long and it was so hard.
Yes.
But it's only then that the real story starts.
How do we then begin to implement this which we were preaching all these years, that are informed by the Freedom Charter?
And the journey.
Now, part of the CODESA negotiations brought something that is known today as the sunset clauses.
I don't think our people understand it very well. However, it's the fault of those that should educate us. Or maybe we shouldn't know.
What? No. These are, in any negotiation, there are compromises. But again, it's to what extent do you stretch your compromise?
And after compromising,
what then?
And how long does the compromise stand? Yes.
Now, the compromise at CODESA was linked, from a time frame point of view, was linked to the lifespan of the government of national unity, which is
a 5-year term.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd said after 5 years, whoever wins the elections can then go back and review all of this
and remove all everything. Start again.
One of the challenges was that in the 5 years, through negotiations, there was an agreement that for this 5 years, we won't change the status quo from a civil servants positions in government's point of view.
Okay.
If you have a general in South African police services, you can remove them for the next 5 years.
Okay. Whoever that had a job in the apartheid government retains their job.
It's that security of
yes,
that is part of what we had agreed upon.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the challenge is that you accept, and there's a rider to that which you know that you can then change this thing
after,
if you were to win elections.
Yeah.
And we win the elections in 1999. After 94.
Outright majority.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't want to tamper with the status quo. Then comes the issue of integration
of
our people into the police.
Yes, and many other spaces. Yes.
State security, into the army.
It goes as far as even the post office.
Everything else.
Yes.
Because you did not want to address that which you had a right to. When you do an integration, if you don't remove a general of the former South African Defence Force, now South African National Defence Force. From that position, what do you think will happen?
You will duplicate. You'll have two.
You'll bring your own people who are generals at this level.
Either lower or higher.
And that goes through with all of these. You retain SAP as white police as they are, and they work throughout until retirement. And they retire, you give them their package. Why would you do that? Part of my argument then, as a member of the ANC, in terms of rank junior to a lot of those that were at CODESA, because I was in the security and intelligence space, I argued for the longest of time with Minister Joe Nhlanhla on the amalgamation of intelligence forces. And my stance, of course, perhaps it was wrong, was that I don't think we need to integrate especially the intelligence services. That is a department that you demolish.
And start again.
And start afresh. If there are 3, 4, 10 from the old NIS that you feel you want to retain for this or that reason, you do that. But you don't leave the establishment of NIS, change the name to NIA,
bring a few
these
new
guys into this.
Yeah.
One, we are outnumbered in terms of positions. They are 3,000, we are 300. How do you feel all of these posts? 2, we don't have at the time nor the capacity to change the policies that guided their own operations against us.
And these are policies that you're well aware of.
We are well aware of them.
Yeah.
They then tweak them to read into English from Afrikaans.
Yes, that's all that changed at the time. Yeah.
Now, let me give you an example of what that means practically. I sit as head of NIA and head of the Gauteng province, volatile province at the time. Trust deficits are at the highest, between us and former NIS. We may have braised together, but there's always that thing.
I don't trust them.
They still might poison me. And.
Yes.
Then you sit at your office, you have a brief or a request coming from head office that says you have to investigate, as an example, Winnie Mandela in a new dispensation. You sit and say, how does Winnie Mandela become a threat to national security?
Yeah. In the new South Africa.
In a new South Africa. You then realize that actually this had been an old mandate that is now being carried.
It continues.
It continues. Do you honestly expect me to instruct my operators to do this? I will defy that order.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense. And I don't care from how high it comes. I won't carry that instruction out because it doesn't make any sense.
And it's that and many similar.
There's a lot.
Yes.
I'm one province of the 9. How many such are spreading where they target
are part of
our own,
the liberation movement?
When does it stop? Where does it stop?
And some of it is not even the liberation movement. It's just because the apartheid government was committed to destroy the fabric of black society.
Yes.
And use all sorts of measures to do it. And some of it is not just going against the ANC leadership or what's that, the freedom fighters, but it's to just do the job of destroying society.
I then ask, what informs this request? I'm given an answer that says, no, but and I'm using Winnie as an
reference,
example, as a reference. That says Winnie Mandela is responsible for the formation of a parallel structure called Mkapla. What the hell is Mkapla? But Mkapla is MK Apla. All right. Mkapla is formed to do what?
Today in 1997.
And it's it's a counter-revolutionary, the unit Tlazagama kind of stuff. Those that are not happy on the outcome of the negotiations would. So Winnie is one of those radicals that, in not agreeing with the sunset clauses and so forth,
So
then
they're forming to fight.
This Barry, yeah, that's why we want to look at that kind of thing. Bullshit over my dead body. You will have to fire me.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
So you guys were confronted with that type of nonsense. But we have to put a disclaimer. The Winnie story is an example.
Is an example, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Even Kapla, right? That's an interesting creation. I like your brain there.
But you see, these instructions are informed by the fact that we have integrated. Had we destroyed this completely and started afresh, none of us in the proper thinking who are part of the new dispensation that drives this revolution would have then come up with such nonsensical kind of instruction.
Were you guys given any compensation by the new dispensation? Now you're coming back.
Define compensation so that I don't fall into the trap of saying we were expecting.
No. And I say this because I don't know. And it's a good point you're making about expectation, whether you guys were expecting anything or not, and whether you even deserve to get compensated. You left the country voluntarily. Yeah. You went to all those places all on your own. You have an amazing story. You can turn that into a book and we buy it and your life is good. As an example.
Yes. I could turn this into a movie.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. There's so much you can do.
Just kidding.
You had an interesting life experience.
Yes.
And it's not like we were having fun here ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, during that time.
You have your own stories that you can tell as those that did not leave the country. There's a lot of it.
Yeah. It's just as rich.
Yeah, absolutely.
As that. So now you're back in the country. Is there an expectation we spoke about expectation at all for just a better life? An expectation for, I must get something. I went to fight for my people. Was the expectation? Two, was there compensation of any kind, whether justified or not?
Let me answer this from the tail end and go back.
Cool.
We did not know until a few years into government.
New government.
Yeah. That actually there are countries and institutions that made a conscious decision to contribute money, finances, towards the rehabilitation of ourselves into the new society.
Because you come back as soldiers.
Yes. And we have nothing.
Yes.
Zero.
You're broke and
broke is an understatement.
You know
something else.
You know how to use a gun.
That's all.
Yes.
Those monies would have paid, amongst other things, for counseling. You are going to meet a few other people if they come through who have stories particularly of Angola, where they were engaged in constant battle.
What? Military combat?
Yes, with UNITA and the rest of the other people.
They were proper.
They
war.
fought because of the Guitokwana Valley fights. Then Resolution 435 that led to the freedom of Namibia. Part of the condition that was brought by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan to the United Nations was that for them to adopt 435, they had their own set of conditions, and one of those was that the MK bases in Angola must be moved further north. That's how we moved from Angola to Uganda.
Yo. I didn't even know that.
In 1988.
Few years before
Yes.
the unbanning and the release of prisoners.
And the reason they did that is because when they conceded to 435, 435 said the South African regime would withdraw from Namibia.
Of course.
And
declare it an independent country.
Nyoma and Swapo would go back. Now, if we remained in Angola,
so close,
and Jonas Savimbi is now weakened, it gives the ANC safe passage into Namibia than South Africa. So they had to say,
they're too close.
They're too close, move them further. Now, in relocating our soldiers from these different camps to Luanda, and then we in 1988 suffered one of the biggest casualties when we were ambushed.
Sure.
We lost plus minus 28 of our soldiers. It was one of the heaviest. You know, in ambush, you should lose 5, 2, 3, give or take at any given time.
Were you in transit?
We were, because we were relocating, we were closing the bases to comply with the United Nations instructions. You remember your Boutros Ghali and that time.
Yes.
Now, I'm reminded when I say I hope to bring people who lived
through that
experience of losing 28 people of our cadres. I was in Moscow when that happened.
Sure.
We got the news because where we were, training, we were visited by both the late Chris Hani and Joe Slovo, and to give us moral support. They were in Moscow for their own Communist Party things, and they came to visit us to give us moral support and so forth. And then they broke the news.
Sure.
Because we didn't know until they came and said, we lost 28 of our comrades as they were retreating.
Sure.
Now, people would speak more on that because they were practically and physically in those combats. Hopefully they will come and see you. Now, what we learned later when we now have a government and a Department of Defense and all of these structures that we have today, it's a fully fledged functioning government. We learned that there were 4 different donations. I hope to verify this and find someone who can authenticate what I'm saying. But we were then told that the US Aid, as an organization that made a handsome donation of around 10 million US towards the integration of these cadres coming home. The European Union made an equal amount in euros. The British government, I think, pushed because our biggest anti-apartheid movement was in London. There was a donation that came from, the British government of around 10 million pounds. And the United Nations, one of the many institutions of United Nations, equally made some $10 million which came to the South African government with the sole purpose
of these guys
and their integration and all of that. Somebody in government saw fit or felt that it's something that these soldiers don't deserve. I do know that debate and that struggle continues to this day. A few years ago, there was a meeting between these veterans and both the Minister of Defense and the Deputy Minister of Defense, somewhere in Pretoria, to look at the overall role of government in relation to veterans.
Okay.
Compensation and everything else. So this particular topic then was put on the agenda by these soldiers. That where is this money?
We've heard about Nyuku, but we don't know what ever happened to it.
And that created a lot of consternation between the two.
Did any money reach the hands of the veterans or the returning? And I mean, let's be clear, for integration.
Are you asking me if I had something?
Did you get anything
Nothing.
from the 40 million
Nothing.
multi
Nothing.
currency?
Nothing from that purse.
Yeah.
Absolutely
So
nothing. That's why cadres of and I'm saying veterans because I want to bring in the APLA,
of course,
Azanla and so forth and say these are liberation veterans all in all and not necessarily MK.
Yeah.
The demands based on what people know about the monies, they were saying to government, if you convert all of those and when the monies were given to South Africa and the interest thereof to this day, you guys, given our number combined, you can afford to give each military veteran who's still alive a 10 million once off. And you still have a lot of change left.
10 million rands each?
Each, once off. From the calculations.
Yes.
They were saying it's possible. And they will still have a lot of change.
That hasn't happened.
It hasn't because government said, but there is no money. And the question was, where is this money?
Whatever happened to it?
It's a $1 million question.
It disappeared in the system.
Yeah. How, where, how, we don't know.
But you can verify that money came.
That's
it's
what
not
I'm
just
saying.
a story created.
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying I hope those who are closer to the story to sit with you and authenticate this. The compromise position was that, okay, maybe 10 million is a lot from where you sit. Give us 6 once off each. And up the pension.
And this is not money from government.
No, it's a donation.
Yes.
That allegedly supposed to be sitting with Treasury.
Sure.
Because that's where it would be housed.
Did the 6 million, was there a compromise position?
No, that's the struggle continues.
Till today.
I would be having a small farm had I been given that 6 million.
Jeez.
Now,
that's crazy.
Pensioners gets, it varies. 2 million to 5 million. I mean, 2,000
per month. Yes.
Yeah.
1,005 and all.
Not all of the veterans are catered for from their children going to school and being paid for by the military veterans department. Some get it, some don't. Part of the package was that we were supposed to get medical aid and use 1 mil hospital in Pretoria.
I see that, yes, the military hospital.
Yes, when we get sick, chronic and so forth, because we have medical aid. Some have got medical aid, some don't. There was a view that in line with international standards, veterans, when you integrate them into society, one way of compensating them would look at their service record in the liberation movement, because SANDF, at the time when these guys were in the bushes fighting, they were also soldiers, but they were better off.
Yes. They were not getting 14 kwacha.
No, they had salaries, the pension is okay. And so by the time they retire, they have these. And now they are paid out by this current government from the fiscus, which you and I who were in the bush are contributing to. Now, they would look at those services so that they bring you in par with your counterparts now, because all of us are now veterans, including SAD.
True. Yeah. Fighting on two sides of the war.
We are now,
but you're now
supposed
one.
to be one.
Yeah.
And that exercise was done. Now, I'm asking you and whoever might be watching this video one day, that how do you reconcile with the following? You have someone who left South Africa in 1964, 65. From then until 1993, which is the cutoff date, you calculate their record of service and any other thing that goes with it, whether your injuries, trauma, and all of that.
Yeah.
And out of that, then calculate a once-off pension. Once-off package.
Like you would if he was in the military in South Africa.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody who left in 63 or 64 in 93, they would have been, 30 years?
29 years.
It's a 29-year of service, which they then have to calculate all of this with, including these things and so forth. I asked this question that how much do you think they would come up to as a once-off in 29 years, once-off compensation? Am I allowed to ask you that?
No, I can try.
Give or take.
Look, I wouldn't have a clue because I don't know the makeup of a military service in terms of their what you call it, their pension. Yeah,
but take a normal basic. You have worked for 29 years for Eskom.
It can be anything less than 2 million rands, for example. Yeah. And I'm equating it to the type of monies we've had. There's a retired teacher. 3 million, 2 million. We've had stories like that, whether true or not. Okay. So based on those type of rumors, I would apply the same to this and say no less than 2 million rands.
All right, which is fair. It's a fair assumption, right? And then you'd gradually go and say 76, then
and you'll end up with a guy who was there for 8 years, like you.
And then you do your calculation. Yeah. Now, if someone were 64 until 93, the overall calculated package is 6,000 rands.
6,000 rands?
Yeah. How much
I said 2 million.
Yes. Do you see the gap?
Wait a minute. Is the 6,000 what?
It's a once off.
Somebody got.
Yes. How much do you think was 76 and 80 and 86 is going to get?
8 years. If a guy 29 years gets 6,000 rands.
Then I'll get 200 rands.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
Did this happen?
I'm giving you a practical. I can even give you the person who left in those years that was 64, 60 something.
And got paid 6,000
and got 6,000 rands.
This is someone who was in exile as an MK cadre for 29 years.
29 years in exile.
Came back when everybody else was coming back to South Africa.
Yes.
And they got 6,000
And then they calculate their...
And they became, did they join the military? Or they were too old to join the military?
Some did, some I demobilized. And I didn't want to continue joining the army because of the discrepancies of the sunset clause.
Okay.
And the fact that we retained those that we were supposed to remove after 5 years.
Okay. You didn't want to work with the enemy.
Apart from that, I come in after having this service in MK. When you come into SA and DF, they start you at a corporal level.
Oh, you start like you just came in. You know nothing about shooting a gun.
And I'm going to report to this colonel and this brigadier who is white, who has been here forever. And the prospects of promotion to a colonel in the army would take forever.
Wasn't that looked into like with a fine comb to say, wait a minute, we can't get this guy who, when he was MK, what rank were you? Were you MK, for example?
There's a metric that they would have to use.
Yeah, but a different rank.
Yes,
but
it's not a corporal.
What is a high rank in military?
It's a general.
You came in as a general.
If you come in at that level as a general, be it lieutenant general or brigadier general, or a fully fledged
general.
5 stars or 4 stars or whatever.
You come in and you're going to be a corporal.
Those are the challenges of the discrepancies.
Don't tell me that is what happened.
No, I'm telling you, that's why some of us did not want to go into the army and demobilized.
You can't come in with a
make sense.
Matric certificate and you started then at 5.
It doesn't make sense.
And you get 200 rands.
Now you then say someone who is in this MK with me, when they come in, they are now put at a brigadier general level and some are put at corporal and we come from the same pot. How does it work? That's a debate for another time as to who was negotiating at CODESA and for what.
Because part of all conversations would have been the integration of the military, integration of the security cluster,
absolutely,
integration of the courts.
Absolutely.
You name it.
The police.
You name it. Everything.
Yeah. The security cluster, as it were, ought to have been dealt with
on its own.
On its own.
Because it's crucial to running a country.
Absolutely. It's the core. If you say we are constitutional democracy, that piece of legislation must be protected.
And also, you have to also point out that South Africa, in Africa, and probably around the world, it's a highly respected military structure.
Absolutely.
At some point.
I don't know what it said.
Let's leave that one.
Yeah,
let's leave that one.
Yeah. It's for those who are in there. I'm out of government and the army and the Secret Service and all of that.
Because it was a South African army was highly regarded. An army that made its own gun.
And reservedly so. I mean, we were selling weapons to the world.
I wonder when was the last time we sold any gun
to anywhere. You manufacture from where?
Denel.
Where is that? Have you been there?
Well, is it there still?
Yeah, I don't know what
the office is still there.
I don't know what they do. Lest we are accused of spilling state secrets.
I must admit, I know very little. But one thing I know that history is very clear about how South Africa used to produce arms, and apartheid South Africa used to sell arms.
We produced one of the best helicopters globally.
I've heard that story. I've heard that story. So we could once make a helicopter.
And the best fighter helicopter, not just a helicopter, transporter, motor from fighter that could be deployed in any terrain in the world.
It's amazing we still don't have a car as a country.
Yeah, that's the mystery.
Like a commercially available car.
If we can make such a sophisticated war machinery like a helicopter. We made one of the most advanced long-range weapons.
I see that, yes.
Made here in Denel. It would hit some kilometers and kilometers. Precision. Where's that today? I don't know. And when I say I don't know, I'm not being spiteful.
You genuinely say, you don't know.
I've left government a long time and I elected not to try and meddle myself in the affairs of government. I'm now a civilian who sits somewhere and talk about Chiefs Pirates. If you're a Chiefs fan, sorry.
No. Don't you worry,
and drink beer and and watch on the sidelines. How government is run or not run, whichever way you want to look at it. Yeah.
Does the battle for recognition and compensation still continue? Are there people that are still fighting for this?
Yes.
Yeah.
The compromise position was that, okay, give us 6 million once off and up our pensions from 2,000 to say 12 or 15,000 a month because you can afford it. It doesn't come directly from fiscus, it comes from this purse.
From the donation money.
The donation, and you can afford it.
And that didn't happen.
It's not happening. But I think those discussions are ongoing.
South Africa's treasury has less and less money. As
to whether they would yield any kind of results, I don't know.
No, we even went to some hidden coffers. That's a Reserve Bank. We're broke, like proper. When you go to hidden coffers, hidden coffers that were, long forgotten. The kind of money you find in your jacket.
Yeah,
when you were, 50 rand. That's what we just used. That's it. We have just tapped into money that surprised us. And I know it's our government. We love them.
We do. And let's continue loving them.
Yeah. But now, because I want to conclude, when you look at your sacrifice and those that you were with, whether in Botswana, whether in Angola, whether in Lusaka, in Russia, and the lives that you guys lived throughout all of that, and we then eventually got this new South Africa. Surely that moment must have been victorious for you.
Absolutely.
What was that feeling then?
And I hope you are referring to the
Nelson Mandela raising
outcome of the results of 1994.
That's what I mean.
The voter outcome.
That's what I mean. I mean, all of us standing in long queues. I voted. I was in KZN. I voted my first vote, and I voted for the ANC. We voted. We were all happy.
It was ecstatic. It was that moment that you finally.
Yeah.
We have arrived. And
you voted. You were here.
Yes, I was here, but I was on duty at the Union buildings.
As
naturally, as part of the security
cluster.
And so forth and so forth.
Were you already integrated into the system?
In 94?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had it. The integration had not completed.
But it was
a process.
Okay.
So there were people who were in positions of authority in this establishment.
Okay. Even before the winning of the elections.
Yeah, the process was getting there.
Okay.
To say we are serious about integration, put your people here and there and there and there and there. Acclimatize, this is how government works. And then you are exposed to this bureaucracy of you can't do this, you can't do that this way.
It's not in Lusaka. You can't just do what you want.
There's authorization, you must wait.
It's paperwork.
And
we can't say we're going to destroy parking Sazon.
You're not used to these things. When you're used to, here's a target, go and hit. And these are the reasons why you must hit. Oh, okay. Easy. Wow.
I'm back. We got it.
Yeah. Now you have a budget that you control. Your province, say it's 5 billion. You must apply to buy a pen, and you're like, what the hell? I can say to the Beea, some more like happens. I don't know, but say you must fill this form. It must go to head office.
So now that clearly is a bit of a surprise to the system.
It's a
I don't want to lose focus of the question.
Yeah.
The celebration of the victory.
Oh yes, look, I'm saying it was something out of this world. It was a feeling that we've never really felt. And after the swearing in, it then dawned that things have changed. We are no longer going back. There will never be a PW Botha or an FW de Klerk and N.
Yes.
It is now the government of the people of South Africa.
Everyone has taken part.
Everyone has taken part. We have a new democratic president, in the form of Nelson Mandela, who is likely to be succeeded by one of our own. As to who, we don't know.
We'll jump that bridge when we get there.
It doesn't matter as long as it's in the hands of this revolutionary movement, because they know they have a plan that they have to implement. Period.
In conclusion.
Yes, sir.
30 years later,
mm-hmm.
Are you still celebrating?
Yes and no. I'm celebrating the one part, and I'm being selfish. I celebrate the fact that God has spared me. I have survived the hardships. I am where I am in one piece. That makes me content and happy. I'm still relatively healthy.
How old are you now?
66.
Antoine.
Kintwa.
Not really.
Compared to Mavuso Msimang.
Yes.
But it's not the youngest of ages. I have my ailments. Sometimes there's a pain I don't understand.
What happened now?
What happened?
I was fine last night. Yes.
Or Noka or
Yeah. But you're relatively healthy.
Yeah, of course, pains from torture at times, before we left and so forth. Now, what saddens me, and not only me, I think it's a whole group of us, is how things turned out to be, how the revolution turned and took a different course to what we had expected. How and where have we lost it to be where we are? How is it that an ANC-led government 30 years later can fix drainage that spills onto the streets in a township that is not white? Because it can happen in Sandton. They will go there and run and fix there and then. Why is it different when it happens, go Sebokeng, and leave it to spill over for 3 years? Why is it that we are in this government and 30 years later, we still don't have proper roads in our townships in particular? Why is it that 30 years later, people still don't have the basics, as in proper clean drinking water? You take the Hammanskraal issue. How does this happen 30 years in a democracy that is led by the ANC? Where did we drop the ball? Maybe ESCOM might be a bigger challenge or problem, but the question is, how do we arrive at not having lights, and they come intermittently 30 years later? How is it that 30 years later, the youth of our country, who are a future of any country, are destitute and unemployed? How is it that we don't have a plan to integrate those that leave school at the varsity level? We don't have a plan on how do we integrate that particular chunk of people that comes out into the mainstream society. How is it that 30 years later, when you look at the black middle class in particular, you have a middle class that is not entrepreneurial as compared to their white counterparts in middle class, because it has an effect on government itself. If you had a middle class that is black, that is entrepreneurial, you would take the burden of the state having to compensate a life that they live through fiscus, because you are then forced to pay exorbitant salaries to a particular position. Because you run Transnet, we must pay you X millions. But if you take a head of Transnet in Japan or China or Malaysia and you compare the salaries, that's that. So where is the plan 30 years later? Because sitting where I am and having gone through so many State of the Nation addresses and the budget speeches over the years.
This one had Tintswalo in it.
Yeah, it has.
Had a character.
Yeah.
Whose life is better, according to the
according
president?
to the president.
Tintswalo's life is
much better.
Way better than it was before.
Before 94.
Tintswalo now's child can go to school for free and get a meal.
Yeah.
Tintswalo's unemployed brother can get 350 rands.
Yeah.
Tintswalo's grandma or mom gets pension.
Yeah.
She does nothing. She wakes up in the morning and sits in the sun, and another month she gets money.
As though it's not your responsibility to look after your old. It is.
Yes.
It's your obligation.
Absolutely. Yes. Tintswalo has a child has free education. Tintswalo can go to university for free through NSFAS.
Yes.
I can keep going.
Yeah.
Tintswalo when she was a kid growing up in Guyana, she didn't have a running water. She didn't have She didn't have electricity when she was a child in Guyana.
Yeah.
And now she's here living in Shawela. Tintswalo has electricity. It may have its challenges, but it's there 80% of the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tintswalo has a roof. It may be a tin roof or an RDP house that is shabbily built, but there is roof. Tintswalo did not have that.
Tintswalo's life is way better than it was
during apartheid.
Absolutely.
Figuratively speaking, yes. But I go to an extent of saying, having said all of this about Tintswalo, there are glaring disparities that an ANC-led government 30 years later could have put Tintswalo in a much better position.
Okay.
It's the quality of all of the things that you had raised that are questionable. And I challenge it because it brings back your commitment as a government of the people. We appreciate Tintswalo highly, but what we are questioning is all of these things that says, why create a welfare society?
Okay.
350 is appreciated. But
it's a fair point. It's expensive on treasury.
Yeah, it's appreciated, but it then creates where I sit dependency. It creates what society is that?
It's a welfare
welfare kind of
socialist
society.
Approach.
Think about it. It's all of these things that says
government will look after its people. Surely that's found in the Freedom Charter.
Yes. But is this what we meant? Becomes the question. If that is what we meant, then personally, where I said I would have serious misgivings about that. And I'm saying one appreciates that there's 350 rands that goes into this household of 7 people
Maybe out of them, 5 get the 350 rand.
50 rand. So combined is that and so forth.
Freedom Charter said education shall be free.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It is free.
Yeah. The Freedom Charter said, what's that?
There shall be job and security.
Yes, and having a roof over your head is a right.
It's a basic human
right.
I agree with that.
It is happening.
Yes.
Through free housing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In my criticism, understand my appreciation. And I'm saying this government, although it has done this, it could have done things differently and better.
Do we over-criticize the South African government in relation to and I say this very carefully, maybe is the bar too high for this government? Are we expecting a government of cadres? We are untrained to run a country. They were trained to fight for liberation. And they found a well-oiled machine and they couldn't run it. And they're learning how to run it as time goes.
What would have been so complicated? If you find
a sophisticated machine. We don't know how to use it. I've given you a microwave in 1974. Yeah. You've never seen it. You don't know where to press.
But you show me. Press here.
I'm not interested in showing you. I don't want you to win. I've been running this country. I don't want you to win. I've never wanted to share this with you. Let's be fair. That is an argument.
No, it's fine. But look at it this way. I think it would be extremely. It would be an over-exaggeration if we say, and I'm mindful of what I'm saying, if we say, because it could be misunderstood and misconstrued, if we say that the regime that we took over from was 100% bent on destruction.
That's true.
It would be an unfair assumption.
They couldn't destroy something they needed to use as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there was a leaf that was extended.
Let me show you how to use this machine.
Yes. And we took a posture that says, no, as to why, I'm not quite sure, because we extended the mistrust to levels where they should not have been taken to.
Are you saying we could have, using ESCOM as an example, we could have learned how to run the machines?
Because those who were in ESCOM before us had an interest in making sure that ESCOM stays
running.
Yeah. Because if you don't, there is no way their houses would stay lit if...
True. Everybody loses.
That thing collapses.
Yeah.
Now, there is information to the effect that some of our government leaders post-94 were advised of where we are right now. They were given everything else that needs to be done and how it should be done.
You're saying they got the keys of the house and which key opens which door. And let's go.
Yeah. There is that narrative, and some people say there's fact to that. And that was not heeded or ignored. I'm not too sure which one is mild to government. We will always struggle if that were to be true, that narrative were to be true. You and I will always struggle as to the reasons behind you.
That's true, yeah.
Not taking or heeding that advice. Was it simply because it comes from your adversary of yesterday? And if that is the case, then I don't know how to classify that.
Are you proud of where we are? That's a deep sigh. We've had a 4-hour conversation. We've never sighed that deep. Maybe you're just exhausted of hearing my questions.
Am I proud of
where we are as a country, as a former MK cadre?
We made milestones and significant ones. The the eradication of apartheid as an institutionalized system is one of the biggest achievements the country could have, achieved and is worth celebrating. Because I'm not sure if people take time, pause, and reflect on what apartheid actually meant to this black man.
When you ask people to do that, they say that's in the past.
What is in the past?
Apartheid. Yeah, you want to talk about old things. We are here now.
We have a one man called Hitler. He's accused of what?
Genocide.
When did that happen?
Years ago, in the 60s.
Is
it in the 60s?
And we forgot about that?
No, we haven't, because the Jewish nation have done a good job of keeping it alive.
Why are we then told that?
I don't know. What are we doing to keep it alive? When was genocide, Tato? of the Jewish by Hitler. So I get my dates right.
So
in
I'm saying part of those who push that narrative would have been coming from the ilk that today continues to remind us of genocide. It's double standard if they do that, because why then would they want us to quickly say it's in the past? The unfortunate thing is that some of our own ilk have bought into the narrative, and they are the ones who are now saying, but you can't always go back and say
and talk about that
talk about apartheid.
Yeah.
But I do it because I'm saying somebody has to really come in, those who have the prowess to put that into proper perspective as to the damage that apartheid has done to this society. It's enormous.
Genocide, 1941 to 1945.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how long it is.
Compared to apartheid.
But we are reminded of that all the time.
Yeah.
In our lives. And we have become familiar with what it is, and we are then becoming sympathetic to the Jews against what Hitler did to them. Not only are we sympathetic, we also have empathy to them. This thing happened. We are 30 years into our democracy, and we are now advised that to talk about apartheid is old news. I'm not convinced it is, and I refuse to follow that narrative because I don't think it's put out with good intentions.
And to add to your statement, we still suffer the scars of it, and that's why this conversation matters so much, because
it's the effect of that has brought you and I to where we
absolutely
are, largely speaking.
You are only 66 now, and your memories of Alex is like it was a day ago.
Oh yes.
of the Alex with buckets and
buckets
toilets.
and living in one room and all of that.
Yes.
It's
South Africa
because they are vivid in my mind.
Yes.
And the reason they are vivid is because they were imposed on me by this very system that they say we must then forget.
Yeah. And some people think that was not a big deal. It's past.
I don't know what they mean by past. This is not a movie. It's not a car.
It's not happening. It's not happening now.
It's not like a car and you say, "Hey,
yes.
It doesn't work that way."
Because it stayed with us.
It stays with you. It's you have a sentence that is extremely high affluent. 3 kilometers or 2 freeways separate Sandton from Alex.
It's not technically not 3 kilometers. It's much shorter than that. Yes, it's 500 meters because it's immediately over the highway.
You have abject, and when we say abject poverty, we mean that. How does? And I'm going back to whether I'm happy with what I see, and I say yes and no. And people may argue otherwise and talk about Tinswalo. But I'm saying, how do you, as a a government geared to uplift and take people out of poverty 30 years later. I know the Premier of the Northern Cape asked that question. Is 30 years enough? Are we realistic and so forth? But I think and I believe in the 30 years, something could have done to make Alex a different township.
For example,
and not what it is today.
Has Alex changed much?
It has changed a lot from when I grew up to
what it is today.
What it is.
For the better. Tintswalo's life now. Tintswalo, who was you.
Well, there's no bucket system.
For example. So Tintswalo's life doesn't have a bucket system.
From that perspective, there's no bucket system.
Yeah? What else?
The roads are tarred. As to whether they are maintained is something else. But
they're tarred. So Tintswalo's life has a tar road from Alex.
Yes. We do have extra street lights.
Okay.
They may not have bulbs 90% of the time, but they are there.
Tintswalo's life has there's an intermittent light.
Yeah, which requires somebody to say, "Hey man, I'm going to globes," and then the township is lit.
Yeah. A quick, easy question. I find Alex quite congested compared to other townships. And there may be others that are similar. However, compared to other townships, I grew up in Mamelodi. I know Soshanguve well. I know Atteridgeville well. I know Garankuwa well. I know Soweto well. So that's my experience of it. When I compare the areas I know in those townships that I've mentioned
to Alex,
I find
nothing matches.
They're two worlds apart.
In those townships you've mentioned, you have a yard and a standing that belongs to this family.
Yes.
Yamashabela or
next door, Kebachamabela, and so forth. Yeah. That's almost all these townships are similar.
Tembisa is the same.
Tembisa is the same. Absolutely. So you may have people who have built rooms at the back because there's room, there's space. It's still your home. And you may find people that have built shacks in some of them.
But
it's in your yard, you're renting them out and so forth. Yes.
Now go back to that, Alex.
Tell me.
That's
why the Tintswalo life.
There's a yard in Alex then, just like a yard in Mamelodi. But the difference now is that in Mamelodi, here, what they do in their yard is
their business.
In Alex, you have Bakikana, Mhlambi, Fervud,
in that same yard.
In that same yard with no amenities or very little.
Of course.
In your yard, Mamelodi,
there's a toilet inside, there's a running storage system. I can add another toilet inside my house.
Yes.
Can do all sorts of things like that.
You have a tap, both outside and inside.
Yes.
In that 10 or 15 family who live in one yard in Alex, they had one tap. Today, take the Tintswalo story. In those one-roomed houses that people occupied then, they managed to draw water and put some semblance of
connections
taps in the house. Balaita, we used to have a candle at the time. But what then has compounded the problem is that instead of having those initial original 10 families, you now have 50 families in that yard.
Jeez, because now there was space, so we used it to build. So that's why you don't find spaces, yards to play and kick a ball back and forth, unless you do it in the street.
For the kids, which becomes a bit dangerous because there are taxis so I'm not sure from a Tintswalo point of view
if that's progress or not.
But somebody would argue that there may be 50 families in one yard, but they have roof, which the Freedom Charter said everybody has a roof. Now, it's the quality of the life of a Tintswalo in Alex 30 years later. And I move from that perspective.
No, and I get it. That's why I say Tintswalo is a very complex character.
So Alex is said to be, the size is 1 square mile. I don't know how big that is.
I get a sense of it, yeah.
It was meant to house 70,000.
What is the population now?
500,000, others say 800,000, others say over 1 million.
And who knows today how many people arrived?
And then that's the problem.
Yeah.
You wake up, there was this tiny little space. You sleep, you wake up, there's a shack. Good morning. It's okay. And you can't ask.
It's Tintswalo's younger brother who moved from some place to there.
From Guyana is now here.
That's it.
Searching for greener pastures.
Hey.
Perhaps that's positive. I don't know how it becomes, but perhaps someone would then argue that it is positive.
The Premier of Gauteng says, let them come. There's enough room.
Where?
In Gauteng. Says, let them come. We welcome everyone.
So I hope I'm capturing the spirit of how, in response to your question as to whether I'm did you say
proud,
happy, proud, excited. Yeah. Our people are free from the yoke of apartheid. That's a huge positive. And I emphasize that government has done a lot. Political prisoners are free. Countries, there's freedom of association, of speech,
of movement.
You
can do whatever.
Everything else.
Look at the freedom of speech, what it does for us.
We have a Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
We have a constitution. We have
an independent judiciary
parliament,
system.
Judiciary. We have the executive. We have a democracy in motion that is working. It has its own ups and downs,
but it's strong.
Yes. We have we vote every 5 years
with no civil war.
Nothing.
Yes.
People move out of office.
Move in with no war.
Yeah, some are pushed, but it's internal. It's worked out.
That's It's still politics.
Yeah.
Yes, almost very few guns are used for national office.
Absolutely,
and I use deliberately national office because there's different story in local councils.
We hear stories that are not nice. Where people lose lives because of they sit in council or that or potential. But at national level, it's smooth sailing so far. The elections have never been.
It's never been declared unfair.
Unfair and so forth. It's always a thumbs up by ourselves as the locals, by the region, Africa,
and the international
community, which is a huge plus. As to whether that speaks to Tintswalo, I don't know. But if it does, then that's the positive.
Tintswalo has a decent country.
Of Tintswalo that came out of the 1994 dispensation led by this government.
I must tell you, based on what we've been saying, and we have to conclude, is that...
How are we going to conclude?
We are concluding. We are concluding. Yeah. It sounds like this is a good deal, based on what we've just said in the last 45 seconds.
How do you mean?
Country is okay.
Okay is relative.
Of course.
Okay.
But it's more okay than it is bad.
In comparison to
where we're from. Which is
the apartheid system.
Which is essentially the president's speech.
Yes.
He's saying, you guys
despite these challenges,
you haven't stopped to compare.
Yes. These challenges that we're facing, I acknowledge they are there. But we are better off.
That's all the president said.
Yesterday.
That's all the president said.
And really you can't fault that narrative, because given all of these challenges, we come from a West situation that forced us into exile. Some died, some were imprisoned. We don't have that scenario.
Do you know, it's the first time I sound like I'm defending the ANC, for the record.
But you're
I'm defending Tintswalo's speech relative to where you and I has been talking since we started.
Yes. I think I'm viewed by those who are closer to me as the biggest critic of government. But they've come to understand that where credit is due, I give it and I defend
the credit you're giving.
That you have to acknowledge the following. Despite these challenges, this is the good that comes out of the 30 years.
Yeah.
My critic says, had we done everything that we were supposed to do and we were not diverted by the many things that diverted us, we could be in a better place, in a better position. Whether we would have had these high unemployment numbers, I don't know, because I'm told unemployment is influenced by a lot of factors, both local and international. And it requires that economists, which I'm far from understanding that sector. But there are basic things that we had gotten wrong that we should have.
We're learning.
It's a learning curve.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Tatebe, former MK Kader. How much school did you have? How much school have you done? Or schooling?
Not much.
Not much?
No, I don't have metric.
You don't have metric?
No.
So most of your education, where did you get it?
From interacting with people in the world.
All around the world?
All around the world. I have traveled extensively and I learned from everybody else that I meet. I learn today, every day.
Wow.
From all and sundry. Those that I meet, I make it my mission in my association with people of all different races and levels in society to learn. And that has been my mission. So if you say to me, here's a position, give me this certificate or that, then I'm not employable because I can't produce any.
You don't have any certificate of any kind?
Of any kind. The ones that I've got are the ones that I acquired through training in security and intelligence in Russia.
Okay.
But as to whether they are worth the paper is written on to be considered in South Africa by the conglomerates or government itself, I don't know. So I elect to say I have nothing. And that's it.
No.
And my friends used to say, but why do you shoot yourself and say you don't have? Good, but what must I say? Shoot someone else and say I have. I can't do that.
If you have some certificates, whether you got them in Russia, there are still certificates you have, I guess. You still trained for those certificates.
I ran this province, and this is not gloating. I ran one of the most difficult provinces from a security and intelligence point of view at an era that was extremely difficult. And we pulled through.
Yeah.
So without metric.
Sharply, bra. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, we have 8 hours and 33 minutes of footage. Yeah. God bless us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
King David Studio Podcast.